internally, you have to be aware of what it is that informs your understanding of who you are and what your life is about. Because if you're not aware of that understanding that informs what you believe to be true about your life and what your self-worth is and all of those other wonderful things, then you're going to be trying to solve a problem without understanding the problem properly. Or you might even be trying to solve the wrong problem. So this leads to a whole lot of issues. And that's why when it comes to owning your life, and we try to talk about owning your life, we forget that to own your life, you must first believe or have reason to believe that you are in control of your life. You can't own something that you don't control. You can't own something that you don't understand. And you definitely can't be in a healthy emotional space if you don't understand why things affect you the way they do. And these are all part of the questions and the problems that we need to unravel if we hope to own our life. So what's some of the problems that we experience in this process? One of the things is that we love labels. Everyone loves a label. And the most famous label is about whether you are halal or haram, whether you are good or bad, whether you are compliant or non-compliant, you're conforming or you're not conforming. And everything focuses on whether you are meeting the expectation or you're not. And if you're meeting the expectation that is placed on you, then you're good. And if you're not meeting the expectation, regardless of your reason for it, then you're not so good. And this is how we go through life. So what we end up doing is that we convince ourselves that in order to be liked and to be significant and to be accepted, we have to meet expectations. We have to do what everyone else needs us to do for them. And as long as we do for them what they need from us, we're okay. Until eventually we realize that no one's really doing a whole lot for us. We just keep doing for everyone else. And at that point, we become despondent. Like, who cares enough to see what we need, and rather than always worrying about what it is that they need from us. And that despondence, eventually, when we see that no one notices that we're upset or unhappy about things, we then slip even further into despondency, which eventually becomes depression. And then when we get depressed about the state of our life because no one notices us and all we are there for is to provide and to serve and to be dutiful, and we feel depressed about that state, then people tell us we have low iman. Doesn't quite add up, does it? Iman and depression are not one and the same. If your iman is low, you're more likely to have a lot more distractions that you entertain, because those distractions keep you from having to face the real issues that you need to face. And in being distracted, you're automatically not focused on what it is that the people around you need from you. And that's where the problem starts, and that's where it starts snowballing and spiraling. Because when we're distracted about what it is that we're not getting, we lose sight of all the value and the benefit that we can create. And when we lose sight of that, we lose sight of our humanness. And when we lose sight of our humanness, we become cold and desensitized and hardened towards the struggles of others. And then we become intolerant, like we see the intolerance in our community. Anyone that doesn't go with the flow, that doesn't fit the norm, that doesn't comply with the expectation that is placed on them by society, is considered to be deviant, or is considered to be misguided or a rebel. It's a problem. And it's a problem that's not going to solve itself by us telling other people that they need to fix themselves, because no one needs to fix themselves. Allah created us for companionship, for partnership, for social cohesion. In the absence of a healthy social structures or of healthy support structures, we start behaving badly. We start believing that we're not worth much, and as a result of that, we start treating others as if they don't matter either. So, where to from here? How do we own our life? The first thing you need to do is you need to understand what it is that you believe to be true about yourself and whether that's really true or not. Because most people believe that they know themselves, right? Meanwhile, the only thing they know about themselves is what it is that they don't want in life. So they're driven by fear to avoid what they don't want, and they think that's leading them in the right direction. But here's the problem with fear. It's not sustainable. It weighs you down. Eventually, you get to a point where you're so tired of the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failure, the fear of not having the right kind of quality of life or not achieving the right milestones and project goals and career goals and things. The moment you are driven by fear and you don't realize it, eventually the sweetness of life is lost. The sweetness of your accomplishments are lost. Because the fear means that when you achieve what you need to achieve, it's almost a sigh of relief that, okay, you avoided that. You avoided that last threat. You avoided that last hurdle. You avoided that last failure or negative outcome that you were afraid of. So what's the difference then? How do you change that? You need to understand what drives the fear in the first place. And more importantly, besides just what drives the fear, you also need to understand what it is that got you to believe that it's only in the face of fear that you are able to do what you need to do. Because the problem with that is that when we're driven by fear, it eventually, like I said, it wears you down. But there's another problem. Once you break the fear barrier, in other words, you don't care anymore about the consequences, what happens then? You lose your bearings. And people around you, they start thinking that you've lost it completely or you become selfish because then you start taking care of yourself, which in itself is also another response to fear. Because your focus on taking care of yourself is because you're afraid that if you don't take care of yourself, no one else is going to take care of you. So again, you're driven by fear. And the sweetness of life is lost when you're focused on fear or when you're driven by fear, because when you finished with it, like I said, you just have a sigh of relief. And then you look at what's the next thing. Okay, what now? What next? What's the next problem I need to solve? What's the next struggle I need to overcome? Who's the next person that's going to treat me badly, or who's the next person that's going to take me for granted? And that's how we end up with chronic illnesses, because we become so convinced that our self-worth is not worth anything to anyone else, that we ourselves must also be worthless. And one of the most common diseases or illnesses that people experience when their self-worth gets diminished to the point of almost nothing is autoimmune diseases. So look at anyone that's got an autoimmune disease and you'll see that their sense of self is in a space that is extremely, extremely unhealthy. Because they have convinced themselves, or not convinced themselves, but because of the way people around them treat them, they become convinced that who they are is not important. It's only what everyone needs from them that's important. So they become a utility. You know, like ESCOM? Well, probably a better example. But they become a utility. Because then it's only about what you can do for others that matters, not who you are and what you need from others that matters. And when you start believing that narrative to be true, you start convincing yourself that you are the problem, rather than seeing why it's impossible for other people to see value in others, or to see something beyond just a life of servitude or martyrdom. I keep saying, I tell a lot of people that we've got the highest number of living, walking martyrs in our community. Because that's how we are. We've convinced ourselves that the more persecuted you are, the more pious you are. It must be, right? Again, we get back to the whole Iman thing and judging ourselves based on how Muslim we are, how whether we are more Muslim than the next person, or whether we are more rigorous in our salah and our performance of the sunnah than other people. And that's part of the problem. Coming back to answering the question I asked earlier, why do we get to the point of wanting to judge someone else's Iman? Why do we get to the point of wanting to judge someone else's goodness as a Muslim, or whether they're meeting the standard or they're not meeting the standard? We get to that point because we're insecure about ourselves. It's as simple as that. The lower your self-worth, the more judgmental you are. The higher your self-worth, the more understanding and compassionate you are. Look around you, and if you see a lot of people around you that you're surrounded with that are insensitive, that are cold, that are heartless, that are not interested in what the human emotions are behind what people are struggling with, if you see that they are that rigid and that inflexible, understand something. The reason they are that way is because they are incapable of being better, because they believe they are not worth it. So they compensate for it. And how do we compensate for these things? When we feel we're not worth it, or who we are is not going to be enough, we resort to the only thing that we know we can resort to. And that is, we claim our space through authority, or through the role that we have been given in any specific structure. And at home, that means that if it's the man of the house who feels like he's not worth it, he's going to become an authoritarian. You know, the ones that will insist on everything being done a certain way and there's no compromise and no questions asked? Authoritarian. Because if you have no reason to believe that you are capable of influencing through kindness and understanding and compassion and love, then you can only rely on the only other thing that will work, which is authority, harsh discipline, dictating to people what it is that they need to do, and you draw on a higher authority. And that's how we start quoting the Quran Hadith in our judgment against others, because we want to judge them for not being good enough, or we lose faith in being able to have a strong enough argument to be able to convince them why it is that what they're doing is harmful. So how did we get to this point? We got to this point because we've been raised with fear and compliance about everything that we do. Fear and compliance. If you do this, you'll be rewarded. If you don't do that, you will be punished. Jannah, Jahannam. Everything is about that. Everything is about fear and reward, about reward and punishment. And if you do what is expected of you, don't expect a pat on the back of it. Because if you do what's expected of you, that's just expected. So who cares? Everyone has their own problems. You must sort out your own problems. Doesn't mean you must feel good about it. But it's not anyone else's responsibility to make you feel good either, because that's life, right? And this is how we lose each other. We lose our families, and we lose our sense of family, and we lose the harmony and the sweetness of life that we work so hard to achieve. We lose that because we're so busy judging each other. And we judge each other harshly because we judge ourselves harshly. And the reason we judge ourselves harshly is because of a low self-worth. So let's unpack that very quickly. Low self-worth. How do you get to that point? Anyone ever see a baby born with depression? Anyone ever see a baby depressed? Did anyone have to sit a baby down and teach them how to laugh and smile? Anyone have to do that to a child before the child became aware of the adults around them and how the adults were reacting to them? No. But eventually, when we become self-aware and we develop a sense of shame about not being good enough because we did something and someone shamed us for it, or we did something and we didn't get the response we wanted, or we constantly tried to be important to someone and they just kept treating us as if we weren't important, then we start convincing ourselves that, hey, hold on, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not good enough and that's why they don't treat me better. Meanwhile, they don't treat you any better because they're incapable of doing it, because they treat themselves in the same way. But we put up these wonderful facades, these wonderful distractions and these coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms, I love that one. We'll get into the coping mechanism but in a few minutes. But we put up this front to appear as if we are in control, as if we are composed, as if we are doing the right thing for the right reasons, and we are just like fighting the good fight. But I keep asking, if that is supposed to be the truth of it, then where does compassion and fulfillment and understanding come in? Because in the absence of compassion and understanding, then what are you actually doing? You're trying to be better than someone else. You're not trying to uplift. You're not trying to raise someone else's standing or try to alleviate their plight. What you're actually doing is trying to prove that you're better than them. And you're effectively telling them, well, be like me and do what I tell you to do and you'll be good. Meanwhile, again, we completely dismiss the human experience behind what it is that the person is actually going through. And that brings us to the whole thing about labels again, about, like I said, mental health. That whole term is actually problematic. Because the moment you have mental health as a term that you're trying to work with, it means that anything that's not considered to be a healthy space becomes a mental illness. And this is going to be a contentious view, but we need to start talking about this. The moment we start saying that you have a mental illness, you're suffering from depression, you're suffering from anxiety, or you are bipolar and things like that, what we're doing is we're saying that your emotional experience, the reason why you feel as overwhelmed about life as you do, we're saying that that doesn't matter. There's something wrong with you. The fact that you lost something or someone that was important to you or close to you, the fact that your life has been disrupted in a way that is completely insane for anyone else to understand how it affected you, doesn't matter. The fact that you're behaving in a way that is not as what we want you to behave, there's something wrong with you. Mental illness. It's not. No one's suffering from depression. And please, I'm not saying that depression doesn't exist or it's not real. I'm saying that no one is suffering from depression. But there is legitimate reason for people to feel depressed. And if you help them to understand, or if you at least try to understand why they feel depressed, you have a better chance of them emerging from the depressed state than you will if you're going to tell them that they're suffering from depression and they need to get help. If you look around in the community, in the families that you know, you'll see that the families that have a very strong, cohesive family structure, a healthy culture, a healthy way of interacting with each other with kindness, understanding, compassion, you'll see that those families, they don't have so-called mental illnesses. But the families that are focused on achieving material goals, they're worried about social standing. The families that are worried about just making ends meet and not interested in what it is that the people in their family unit are experiencing. The families that are worried about duty above all else and servitude above all else and knowing your place, I guarantee you, even if it's not diagnosed, so-called diagnosed, those families will be struggling the most with emotional health, with well-being, with being balanced and grounded and feeling a sense of fulfillment in life. So it comes down to a simple thing. If you don't treat yourself with kindness, it's impossible for you to treat someone else with kindness. And sometimes if you treat yourself harshly while you still treat someone else with kindness, that's not true kindness. That's you pleading to the world to say, please treat me this way. That's why I don't want anyone else to feel the way I feel. And it all comes down to your self-worth. And again, we're talking about self-worth. Self-worth. Not the worth that other people place on you, the worth that you place on yourself. How valuable do you think you are? Not how valuable do other people think you are. And this is another thing that is easily lost. We're so focused on other people validating us and approving of us and confirming that we're good enough that we lose sight of the good that we have within us. And that's why we end up losing ourselves to those struggles and we lose ourselves to relationships. And that's why when we go through a divorce or we go through a breakup of some sort or we go through some other upheaval in life, immediately the first thing that happens is we question our worth. Why me? Why wasn't I important enough for them to be better than this? Why couldn't they have treated me better? All because we lost sight of who we were and we became defined by the people around us and how they treated us. And we lost sight of the fact that the only reason they treated us that way is because they feel that way about themselves. They feel that way about themselves. People that are harsh, they think they're not worth it. People that are inflexible, they're the ones that believe that no one gave them a break, so why should they give anyone else a break? People that find it difficult to even shed a tear or to hug or to tell someone that they love them, those people, they find themselves in those spaces and they find themselves finding it difficult to express themselves emotionally because they were raised in an environment that was emotionally inaccessible. They were raised in an environment that was emotionally inaccessible. And this comes back to the judgment thing. We're so quick to judge others that we forget about where we came from. And when we judge others, we forget that they didn't raise themselves either. And this is not to make excuses or to condone what people do or to condone bad behavior. But we forget that people didn't raise themselves. They're doing the best with what they know to be true or believe to be true. And if we start understanding what it is that shaped their perspective of reality, then we might just consider why it is that they behave the way that they do. I guarantee you there is not a single person alive that will behave badly if they feel appreciated. Not one. Any person that behaves badly, they're behaving badly because in that moment they feel insignificant. They feel like they've been taken for granted. They feel as if their presence is not worthy to anyone that's important to them. And that's why they behave badly, because they demand significance. They want to feel like they belong somewhere. So why do we need that significance? Because part of our innate nature that Allah created us with is that we want to be of positive consequence to the people around us. We want to know that our presence matters, that we make a difference, that without us, it wouldn't quite be the same even if they got the same thing from someone else. And when we feel invisible, that's when our self-worth takes a knock, and that's when our relationships slide. Because who we are doesn't matter. Only what we are supposed to provide for others is what matters. So this is part of the problem that we've got. And in a community that is raised on fear and compliance all the time, and you can hear it, all our discussions, all our lectures, everything is always focused on what's the consequences of not being good enough. What's the consequences of not doing the right thing? The moment your focus is consistently on the consequences, you lose sight of the human. When you lose sight of the human, you lose the ability to influence them towards good. Because people want to feel heard, they want to feel noticed, they want to feel significant. And that is why when you don't feel those things, you don't expect anyone to treat you any better. And you don't have any capacity within you to treat anyone else better. So here's the thing. There's two things we get from our parents, and this is something that is core to everyone's self-worth, overall sense of self. There's two things we get from our parents. The first thing is a sense of belonging, roots, a home, where we can go back to in times of trouble or in times of stress or emotional duress. The second thing is a sense of self, that we have value to add, to create in this world, that we can do something that is meaningful and beneficial to others. The first one, the sense of belonging, we get from our mothers. Our relationship with our mother defines whether we believe we have a place in this world that is worth going back to. The second one, our sense of self-worth, we get that from our fathers. That's why the father is responsible for establishing a healthy self-esteem in their children. If you don't get the healthy self-esteem, but you have a sense of belonging, guess what? You're constantly at war with this place you're in because you don't believe you're good enough to be there. If you don't have a sense of belonging, but you've got a healthy self-worth, you have no reason to believe that anyone is there for you. So immediately you become what we love to call narcissistic in behavior. Meanwhile, we create these narcissists and we create these bipolar behaviors, and we create these people that have these problematic mental health issues. But we don't want to acknowledge our responsibility towards it because that demands owning your contribution towards someone else's life. And if you believe you're not worth it, if you believe you're not good enough, guess what? You don't want to be held responsible for what someone else is falling short in.
Faisal. Okay, so as Zaid was saying, we need to understand how to deal with narcissists. So I just want you to quickly tap 5 minutes into that, because I think every single one of us has a situation where we're facing a problem with a narcissist, but we don't actually realize. And I think most of us don't know what the definition of a narcissist is. So Zaid's going to give us a quick 5 minute, and then we're going to do a quick interview, ask you questions, and then we're going to be done with this. So Zaid, you can take over.
Okay, why am I not surprised that narcissism is such a big issue? So narcissism, if you follow the mainstream understanding of it, it's someone that is extremely manipulative, someone that will be very selfish, someone that is harsh and likes to put up a front in front of others while treating other people badly. So the whole ghosting and the whole catfishing and all of those negative traits that you come across in people, if someone behaves in that way, we assume they're a narcissist. Now, here's the thing about labels. The moment you call someone a narcissist, you lose sight of the human struggling behind that behavior. Because what does cause narcissism? Narcissism, and you can go and look this up in all the psychiatry manuals and everything else, and they'll all tell you the same thing. The reason for narcissistic behavior is intense insecurity about who you are. Intense insecurity about who you are. If you are intensely insecure about who you are, you're going to constantly put up fronts to make it seem as if you are not impacted by other people. To make it seem as if what it is that you need from others is not important because you are so good, you can take care of yourself, and you will make sure that you will exceed anyone else's goals and expectations because that's how good you are.
So, in a little nutshell, quickly, how do we deal with it? Because a lot of us face narcissists and they force us into things and they make us feel guilty. And it's a kind of an abuse. I look at it that way because there's always that you don't this, you don't that. It's always the don't, and I don't see and I don't understand. And it's always the negativity. How do we deal with it quickly in a nutshell? Because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay, very quickly. The first thing you need to recognize is that while it may be abusive, it's not intentional abuse. Yes, it's abusive, and we're not condoning the behavior of people that behave in a narcissistic way, but it's not intentional abuse. Now, here's the thing. What problem are you trying to solve? Are you trying to correct their behavior? Or are you trying to understand why it is that they feel threatened by anything you say or do towards them? Because that's the problem you need to solve. And you can't solve that second problem about why they feel so insecure if you're going to keep labeling them as a narcissist and you're not going to see the human behind it that's struggling for significance. Take a narcissist and put them in an environment where they feel appreciated, and I guarantee you they won't appear narcissistic at all.
Interesting that you bring that up. A very interesting topic about owning your journey, and that's what it's about, everybody. We're trying to help you get into a better space, better place, and having a quality of life. And Zaid has definitely shed a lot of light on it. I've been looking around. People have been paying attention, although you might not think that way. I think you've grabbed people's attention, especially when we spoke about narcissism. But we know you wrote your book on Own Your Journey. So quickly talk to us about it. If any of you are interested in buying this book, trust me, it's worth the investment, because whatever Zaid spoke about today, it's a little tiny bit of what we can learn from him and how we can move our lives forward. So I'm saying what we need to do is support him and buy the book. What's the price of the book, Zaid?
It's,
Because as we know,
179.
it's 179 Rand, but because he believes in what Sultan Bahu does and their ethos, Zaid's giving 50 Rand from every book that they sell back to Sultan Bahu. So let's support him, but at the same time, get enticed into a positive space to be able to, through this book, I mean, he's here today. Unfortunately, we're not going to have you in our presence all the time, but you will in the form of the book. The book is going to teach you how to deal with many issues that you face in your life. So we're saying Zaid is year round. If you'd like to purchase the book for him, as he says, it's 179 Rand. From there, 50 Rand goes back towards Sultan Bahu Center to show the appreciation and, of course, the support towards all the projects. Because as we know, each one of you sitting here is also serving a purpose today, because thus far, for everything that you've spent, those proceeds are going back into those projects. So every single one of you has value for us today. You're here with value, loads of value, because you're supporting an initiative that means a lot. It reaches out to those in the most dire needs. That's what Sultan Bahu does, is define the needs of the needy. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today on a journey of our own to be able to entice us to find a better journey of ourselves, and of course changing the negative into the positive. As we know, it's not going to happen in an instant, but it's through your book, of course, and yourself learning a lot more. So Jazakallah, what words would you like to leave us with today?
I think just the final word would be that when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong and you can't, and you've been trying all your life to figure it out, you need to stop and consider whether you understand the problem well enough. If you don't understand the problem well enough, you're going to keep breaking your head trying to figure out something that doesn't make sense. So that's when you have to step back and get a fresh perspective. And inshallah, the book will help you to get a fresh perspective, because it doesn't tell you how to live your life. It just raises awareness about why it is that you figure things out the way you do.
Lovely. So if any of you would like to buy the book, Zaid is here. He will be here for a few minutes, so you can go ahead and buy the book from him. Just remember, it's also supporting a worthy cause in both senses. It's helping you uplift your life by reading a couple of things that's going to help you overcome certain challenges, but also give you a better perspective on how to deal with your issues. Am I right?
Yes, inshallah.
So Jazakallah so much for joining us. It's been always a pleasure chatting to you now live and on our show. We look forward to chatting to you in the future on the show about these perspectives. If you're interested in the book, please do buy it. We're saying, as I said, it's going to give you a better quality to be able to go in your own space of time, read and get enticed into better spaces. If you do miss out on it, you're welcome to call us at Salam Media to get Zaid's details. We will definitely share them with you so you can get a hold of the book in the future. Jazakallah so much. We appreciate you supporting us and supporting the worthy cause of Sultan Bahu Center and, of course, their amazing projects.
Barakallah. Always appreciate the opportunity just to raise more awareness about this.
Thank you so much. And this was Zaid Ismail, an author, life coach, and of course a mentor. He's definitely changing lives in many spaces, places. And if you want to look out for him, do join us on Salam Media on a Thursday between 11 and 1 with with myself, Nafeesa Dangor, on the mid-morning show, where we, of course, change you into better spaces, better places. And if you really want to watch us now, then follow our lovely sister, Sister Maria Makwanda. Please come up for 2 seconds. We belong to a phenomenal family. Salam Media, our guests, our coaches, is a family. We're not individuals. We all belong to a team. We all belong to a family. And I promise you, the moment we walk in there, that family environment is there. And that's what it's about. It's for us to be able to build each other up as people and not break each other down. And this is what we do as a team at Humanitarian Journalism. Sister Miriam Makwanda, thank you so much for joining us. Just give us a quick perspective of your thoughts today. And Sister Miriam has her own show as well. It's called the Mid-Morning Show with Sister Miriam. And that happens on a Wednesday, a Tuesday, and a Wednesday between 11 and 1. I come on a Thursday, and Sister Miriam Mia does a Monday. But each one of us has a profile. So, sisters, give us your quick profile before we say goodbye.
First of all, where's my badge? All right. Shukran, Sister Nafeesa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Mariam Makwanda, and I am a broadcast journalist. I do TV and radio broadcasting. So if you are familiar with my face, great. If you're not, then now's your chance to get familiarized. All right. So today, what we're going to be doing is just going around inside the hall, chatting to some of the vendors are on display, maybe test a few things, a sample here and there. You know, I like sampling things. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to taste some food. So I hope the vendors are ready for us as well.
Jazakallah, that's Sister Miriam Makwanda. So that's why we're saying join us on Salam Media from a Monday to a Friday, where you get enticed into better spaces and places. Each one of us brings some form of value to be able to uplift and change your life. And Zaid, you're one of them. Thank you so much for being a part of our phenomenal family. The Zaid is our life coach on our shows, and he's just one of them. But I tell you, when you listen to him, as I said before, and I'm going to say it again, join him, because join us to be able to make your lives better, because that's what it's about. Jazakallah so much. We really appreciate your presence today. It's definitely made a change. I think you've given people loads of food for thought, and I'm hoping they get to buy your book today.
Barakallah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah. And we're now going to go live from the vendors. So we're going to give people, if you do want to join us, we Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube live. Do join us on our Salam Media pages so you can get a better idea of what to expect here at the Fete. Join Sister Miriam Makwanda as she takes us on a journey through the vendors and what you can expect. And of course, what sort of shopping experience you can have. It's not just about enticing you, but giving you a bit of that fun aspect. So go and support them. In turn, you will be supporting the projects. Jazakallah. From myself and the team, have a lovely one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Do join Sister Miriam Makwanda. Jazakallah Zaid. Thank you so much. And don't forget to buy that book. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.